Right, so I think we can get the event started because I see that many of you have already connected on Zoom. Good morning to everyone and welcome to another consumer debate brought to you by BEUC, the European Consumer Organization. Today's event goes under the title, The Consumer Switch to Heat Pumps, How to Turn the EU's Action Plan into Reality. Because today we will find out how difficult it actually is to buy and install a heat pump based on the results and the evidence gathered by a new study published by BEUC. Some eager consumers from different European member states went on to a mystery shopping to discover really what are the barriers, the challenges, but also some good practices across EU member states when buying or installing heat pumps. Because in the meantime, the European Commission is busy preparing its heat pump action plan. And this webinar will be providing the consumer perspective on how provisions on consumer rights must be strengthened. So in the next hour or so, just about an hour and 15 minutes, what's this webinar going to be looking like, what the structure is going to be. So first of all, we're going to start with a presentation of the results of the study and of the mystery shopping, as well as some of the conclusions and points to be taken into account in the policy making. And then we will dive deep into this topic in a panel discussion in which we will be hearing from the European Commission, but also the industry, the consumer perspective, etc. So first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Ana Gumbau. I am a climate and energy journalist in Brussels, and I'll be moderating this discussion. And we would like you to be an active part of this event. So in order for you to participate and share your thoughts, please keep the conversation going on Twitter using the hashtag consumer debates. We would love to hear your thoughts online to see what particularly struck you from this event and this discussion. And as well, those of you joining us live in Zoom, you can put any questions in the Q&A box. During the panel discussion, we will have some time for Q&A, so be sure to use the Q&A box for that, not on the chat, because we will not be able to see it otherwise, but we will do our best to take as many questions as possible. Then the full report, as well as the executive summary of the study, is already available on BEUC's website. I believe my colleagues will be putting on the link in the chat. And also the webinar is going to be available for rewatching just afterwards. So without further ado, it's time to present the study results and what are the policy recommendations based on this mystery shopping of heat pumps. And for that, I would like to give the floor to our first speaker. She is policy officer at FECU, the Spanish Federation of Users and Consumers. With us is Paz Serra. Paz, welcome.
Hello, thank you very much for having me in this consumer conference. It's a pleasure to be here with you and to be discussing the study we did on heat pumps and the mystery shopping we did together with BEUC and 3 other different consumers organizations from countries across Europe. So what did we do? We did mystery shopping with 40 different consumers across 4 countries, so 10 consumers per country from different regions. This is particularly important, the difference in the regions in countries such as mine, Spain, where we have 5 different climates. So we tried to do a representative study on how easy it was to contact and purchase a heat pump in each country. And then consumers who were already interested in installing these heat pumps, then they reviewed the process, how easy it was to get in touch with retailers, with heat pump installers, how long did they take to have a study done on the houses and the suitability of the heat pumps systems. However, no purchase was involved in the study. So the study goes up to the purchase point. And the first thing we asked our consumers was why did they want to install a heat pump? What was their thought process in wanting to switch to heat pumps? We were particularly curious, I must say. In Spain, for example, we know that over 50% of consumers don't even know what a heat pump is. So what we found out is that the cheaper energy is a key driver to buy these kinds of heating systems. But also the failure of the old heating system. So as gas and fossil fuels heating systems in many houses across Europe are starting to fail, this could be a good point to really promote and boost the switch to heat pumps. But what we found out also is that it is the word of mouth and the conversations with other consumers that is the key driver and the most powerful one to make heat pumps um, a likable option for many consumers. And this is both in the good and the bad direction. So for example, if if a consumer has friends who have had a good experience with installer and are happy with their installation, they are more keen to installing a heat pump. And on the other hand, if what they know from people around them is that the process is difficult or hard, this is a very powerful also message telling them that they don't need such a heating system. So, and another thing to keep in mind is that almost 80% of the consumers did have a talk with their family and friends about changing to heat pumps, but only 20% decided to consult with an expert. So the faster we can make this process smoother for all consumers, the faster we can help boost the switch to heat pumps. But to once they decide to change to a heat pump, it's the moment consumers decide to get in touch with heat pumps providers and installers. And then there we have very huge differences among countries. And I must say that consumers in Slovenia, Slovakia, and Czech Republic did find it easy to get in touch with a heat pump provider, while consumers in Spain did not. It is true that we in Spain made a very clear specification of what kind of heat pumps were to be included in the study, but it was because they are the ones that have the financing from the schemes from the ministry. So you would think that it can also be a booster for consumers and there might be a plan with all retailers and providers to make heat pumps visible for consumers, but the reality was the opposite. It was quite hard to get in touch with a heat pump provider, and even when consumers in Spain did get in touch, the responsiveness of the heat pump providers was unstable. In Slovenia and Slovakia, governments provide an official list of installers, which is useful in terms of consumers having a list of people and retailers they can contact and that have the backing of the government, while Spain and the Czech Republic do not. In Spain, there is an official registry of such installers, but it is not available to the public. So it is more like a validation of their skills, professional skills, but there is not a list that consumers can consult in the process of buying a heat pump. And another thing is that people tend to look for information on the internet and want to get as much information as they can on their own, but independent research is not enough. There are too many websites with often confusing messages and colliding messages. So the professional advice is needed in order to know what kind of heat pump is suited for consumers' needs. And often the information found on the internet is not precise enough when it comes to the cost of the installation or the heat pump type that is suited for each kind of home, or all the financing options that are available to consumers. Without the help of the professional, this is a very difficult task for consumers to get around. So another key thing is to have enough professionals. And when it comes to how long the installation process is and how long it takes for the installer to first visit the home, the differences among countries, and with you can see there that even within a country there are many differences from one installer to the other, and you can say that, for example, in Czech Republic the minimum it took was 7 days, but then the maximum was 21 days. Or in Spain, the slot goes from 2 days to 29 days, so it's very difficult to draw a conclusion here on how long it takes. And but it was only this was the first visit, and the time it took for having a quotation was even longer. It took as long as 7 months in one case, but the average is 3 months. So it is a very long span of time from making a decision to having the heat pump quotation to get ready for installation. Next slide. And the consumers in most countries, except for Spain, were happy with the visits from the installers, with the information providers, with the technical knowledge, how they explain the process for the average consumer and the needs for the heat pump installation. But in Spain, there was a lack of technical information and a very limited information on the review of the house and the state of the house and which heat pump was needed. And it was in all countries hard to organize the appointments with the installers, really. So there is really a lack of installers across Europe, we can say. And there were consumers disappointed that even if the renovation was needed for the installation of the heat pump installers were not responsible for such renovations, and they were only referred to other professionals. In Spain, for example, this wasn't even the case. The heat pump installer didn't make any assessment of the needs of the house, and the subsidies and loans available for consumers are also a key factor to drawing attention from consumers to heat pumps. And they were not mentioned by all professionals. And for example, in Spain, they were never mentioned. And but at the end of the journey, we can say that in most countries, consumers feel ready to install a heat pump. We can say that in my country is not the case. In Spain, 0% of the people were happy enough with the information they got from the installer. But in Slovenia and the Czech and Republic, it was 100% and 75%. So the installers did a good job there. And it means what it means for policy. What we are here for is that the heat pumps are key for allowing consumers to have cheaper energies. So what we can say is that the running cost of the heat pump should be lowered to make it even more appealing for consumers. And what we see is that there is a lack of trained installers, and the installers need to be properly trained on the specific needs of heat pumps, and this includes energy efficiency training and the needs for the houses to how well prepared needs to be the house to install a heat pump. And so in order to make it also more appealing for people to be an installer of heat pumps, there is a need for an EU-wide campaign of communications for careers in the industry to make it more appealing, to kind of show the opportunities this training can have. And also when it comes for the solutions for financing, there is guidance needed for member states, and this is not only when it comes to subsidies, but also all the financing options of house retrofitting and the installation of heat pumps. And also, given the number of consumers that are not entirely happy with the job did by the installers, consumers need to have the right to alternative dispute resolution when it comes to bad installations, to make sure that they feel safe and secure enough that switching to a heat pump will be a good thing in the long run. Thank you.
Brilliant, Pat. Thank you very much for the presentation of these results. I think it's really important to hear these real life examples, and it tackles many of the topics that we'll be also talking about in detail in the panel discussion. You've highlighted the longer waiting times, the question of skills and the need for more professionals in the field, the questions whether, how do we know if our homes are heat pump ready, the financing options. And I believe that many of our attendants probably in the webinar, maybe they see themselves in these conclusions and have found themselves in this situation as well. I'd be very curious to hear about that in the chat. So thanks a lot, Pat, for being with us in this webinar. And now let's move on to the next segment of this webinar, which is our panel discussion. As mentioned, there are a lot of topics, a lot of barriers that the policies need to tackle. So we will be hearing from different perspective in the still next hour or so. So I would like to, first of all, briefly introduce our speakers. I will invite you to turn your cameras on. So first of all, we have with us the Deputy Head of Unit at the European Commission's Directorate General for Energy, Paula Rey Garcia. Also with us is the Head of EU Affairs at the European Heat Pump Association, Josephine van Wesselare. Also next up is the Heat Pump Business Manager at Iberdrola Smart Clima, Alberto Sota Ruiz. Also joining us is the Director General at BEUC, our host in this webinar, Monique Goyens. And last but not least, we also have with us the Policy Manager at the European Public Health Alliance, Christina Prikop. So thank you very much to all of you for joining us this morning. And I would like to start hearing from the European Commission and from Paula Rey Paula, what are your initial responses to the findings of this study? What struck you from the results?
Yes, hello, good morning, and thank you very much for inviting me to this meeting, and also very interesting to also hear the presentation of the findings. So I think, in fact, there were quite so many elements that were very telling. But if I am to pick a number of them just to start, let's say, the debate, I would maybe mention on three issues. First, on installers. So we already knew about the importance of installers, which is really one of the focuses of the heat pump action plan that the Commission is preparing. But it's clear that in the study, we see that the issue is not only availability, so quantity of installers, but also very much training, the quality of training. And this is an area where we see that, of course, there are differences, as it was explained, across member states, across regions, but still, overall, across the EU, it requires further work. And this is an area where we are working quite closely also with our colleagues in other directorates general, being DG Employment or DG Clima, DG Grow, but we are also trying to liaise much more with member states. And in fact, I will be taking part later this week in a meeting of the 3 concerted actions, bringing together the member states, working on the Renewables Directive, the Energy Efficiency Directive, and the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, and with focus really on training and on skills. Here we'll also try to engage also with the national responsible bodies to see what else we could do at the EU level, although a lot, of course, relies on industry and on the national level, but not only. Another element would be really accessible information, quality information. I think that also comes very much across the findings. And this is really a broad area, as we see also in the report. So it needs to tackle technologies, also adjusting to specific homes and buildings. It needs to go into financing solutions, but also payback periods, running costs. So it's quite a broad area, and also one focus for our work, where we would try really to bring on board all the actors, so industry, businesses, and national and regional administrations. And then maybe just to pick a further area of attention, although, yeah, there are several others, I would see really the focus that is put on running costs and their importance next to upfront costs. For heat pump deployment is also quite a point of attention. And here, what is quite good is to see that member states can already make a huge difference. And it's good also to have in the study the examples, for instance, of Denmark or of the Netherlands, where really through taxation and through levies design, which is an area really in the hands of the member states, they can really make a difference by shifting those from fossil fuels towards electricity, in terms of favoring electricity and heating as compared to fossil fuel heating. So I think those are really 3 areas that were the findings I consider that are quite interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paula. Looking forward to discussing these key points further in this discussion. Now I would like to turn to Josephine. As part of the European Heat Pump Alliance, I believe that a lot of the key issues highlighted you were already familiar with, but what are perhaps your responses to the finding? What is something that particularly struck you?
Yeah, thank you, Anna, and also Paula. And first of all, it's really great to see such a research, because indeed many of the conclusions are also, recommendations from our side and conclusions that we make, but it's always good to now really have it backed by a concrete research and really, this mystery shopping and backed by actual consumer experiences. So thanks for that. The first point I actually wanted to mention is what Paula mentioned as a last point. It's this pricing issue. It's something that we are stressing, that we continue to stress. The operating costs of heat pumps really, they need to go down. So the electricity versus gas price ratio is really a crucial point to make the whole business case for a heat pump work out, because a heat pump is 3 to 5 times more efficient than a gas boiler. And then normally you would expect, that you pay lower in operating costs. But in many member states, the taxes and levies on the electricity bill are still much higher than on the fossil fuel bills, which makes that the operating costs are higher, so that the efficiency is not shown in the financial return. So this is really a key point, because you can do marketing campaigns, you can have very good installers and so on, as long as the costs does not reflect actually the efficiency and sustainability of the solution, then it keeps being a challenge. A second thing that really struck me also from her explanation before is that one of the drivers was that the failure of the old system, and this is quite risky, because if during the cold season, during the winter, the old system fails and you have to go quickly to a new system, then it's quite challenging, especially what we see with the lower the long lead time sometimes for installation, also the lack of information on the heat pump. Also, that we heard that only 50% apparently of consumers knows what a heat pump is. So this is quite worrying, because if you have an emergency replacement of your heating system, well, then if you need to take other measures and you need to completely inform yourself, a lot of people will tend to just replace it with the system they know and that they have currently. So that's really a key point, this information that is needed. And then a third point I would highlight is the fact that this independent research is not enough, that people need more advice, also more explanation on the funding opportunities. There, our clear recommendation is to have these one-stop shops. One-stop shops at a local, regional level, where you really have access to information on funding, where administration is taken over, where a list of good installers is provided, where quality checks are done. So it's really a one-stop shop for heat pump installation. So all these research and so on and dispersed types of information are really focused at one point and help the consumers.
Thank you very much, Josephine. Some indeed very interesting points, particularly when it comes to the failures of all systems being the drivers of heat pump installing, or interest at least in getting heat pumps. So thanks a lot for that. Now, I would like to turn to our representative of Iberdrola, Alberto Sota. What do you make out of these results? Also, anything that particularly struck you from this?
Good morning, and thanks for inviting me to the panel. First of all, I would like to say that, at least for me, in the report, we see a similar customer experience in the 4 countries. So I think that the problems are common for the countries. It's true that there are some differences between them, but I think all we are going to talk about the same thing: the price ratio between gas and electricity, the lack of installers, and probably also the heat pump culture, because consumer there's a lot of work. I think that during the last 4 or 5 years, everyone involved in the business has made a lot of efforts teaching this heat pump culture, manufacturers, installers, the administration. But today, the consumer still don't know how it's going to work the heat pump at his home. So I see that we should improve this this heat pump culture in order to everyone be able to make a decision on this technology change. Also, and I think is the most important thing, is the lack of installers. I think that the customer experience is not as good as it could be, and it's poor because there are not too much installers. For example, in Spain, and I believe it will be similar in the other countries, historically we have plumbers, we have AC installers, electricians, but at the end of the day, to install a heat pump, you need a combination of the three. So we need to adapt these installers to teach and get more people involved in order to get a better customer experience. And I think that this lack of installers makes that the waiting time when you ask for an offer, or if you want a professional come to your home to see if your home is compatible with the heat pump, makes a very long journey. And many of the consumers, even the consumers who need to change his equipment because his boiler has break, desist on the heat pump. So for me, the biggest challenge is going to have enough installers and reach to the consumer, because there's a space there between the consumer and the installer. And one thing I've been surprised in the study is regarding the investment. A heat pump right now, and air-to-water heat pump, is a big investment. I always say that heat pump purchase decision is similar to a car purchase decision, so it's a long decision, and financing is one of the most important decision if we want to make a massive heat pump market. And one finding I see in the report is that the installer didn't offer financing to the consumers.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alberto. You tackled the question of the lack of installers. And I think from this point of view, it's very encouraging to see how this is one of the priorities in the heat pump action plan that the European Commission is proposing. And related to that, I would like to bring now on board our next speaker, Monique Goyens, Director General at BEUC, because we saw in the study the importance of having a helpful, hands-on installer that can provide the guidance and the answers to the many questions that a consumer may have. Also, when we're just talking now about this heat pump culture and still like certain lack of knowledge from the average consumer. So when a consumer heads into making this purchase, what are the main questions that they are asking in terms of practicalities, in terms of funding opportunities? What can you tell us about that?
Yes, thank you, and good morning to everybody. In fact, first of all, what do people want? They want warm houses at reasonable prices, huh? And if that can help also the energy transition, that's a bonus. And what I would like to say first is that it's a big investment for people. And people who need to invest, they need to be able to trust and to have previsibility. I love the idea that Josephine mentioned about the one-stop shop. Of course, we like one-stop shops also. But what is very important is that people need to have answers to very basic questions when you need to decide on whether you buy a heat pump or not. Is my home fit for a heat pump? And do I need to renovate? And what type of renovation do I need to undertake? How much is it going to cost? I mean, very basic questions. And what we currently see is a lot of fake news around heat pumps, or pollution, can I say, on the market, on the informational market around heat pumps. So you really need there to install a trustworthy environment for people to undertake that step that they need. It's a courageous step that they need in an environment that is not really very clear for them. And there is where installers really make a big difference, and where we really would welcome, first of all, better trained installers, and a list of installers that are verified. So this lack of installers is certainly a major factor for people not being able to make that step. And as I said, it's a big investment, and so and it must have a reasonable price. And what was mentioned already, it's not only the upfront investment that is important, but it's the total cost of ownership, and there the running costs. I mean, electricity. You mentioned, all of you mentioned it already. It's more expensive than gas, and there must really be a political, let's say, vision in order to get rid of the fact that gas heating is the most attractive solution financially for consumers. That must be really a message, a signal that has to be given by policymakers by reducing taxes and duties that are linked to electricity and not to gas.
Thank you very much, Monique. And then last but not least, I would like to hear from Christina Prikop from the European Public Health Alliance. We've seen at the very beginning of PATH's presentation and the study results that really the financial savings, the cheap energy is really the main driver or the main argument while consumers will switch to heat pumps. But from the perspective of public health, what are other reasons that that you would be giving for consumers to move away from fossil-based heating and cooling and fossil-based energy? What can you tell us?
Thank you. Hello, Anna. Hi, everyone. And thank you for the invitation. It's really great to be part of this conversation. And there are indeed many, many important reasons to move away from fossil fuels. And certainly from our perspective, health is one of them. So the one sentence short answer to the question is that heating systems that burn fossil fuels and biomass produce harmful air pollution in that combustion process, while clean solutions such as heat pumps do not. And that seems simple enough in a sense, but is this really that big of a problem? And what does it actually mean for people, for consumers, for their health? Well, air pollution is the single largest environmental health risk that we're currently facing in Europe. 97% of the urban population is exposed to levels that are deemed harmful by the scientific consensus, by the World Health Organization. And we oftentimes think maybe of transport, maybe of industry when we think of air pollution, but in fact, the building sector should not be overlooked. Energy use in buildings is responsible for more than half of the fine particulate matter emissions in Europe. So it is clearly important for people to be aware that the heating system that they use in their homes has an impact on health via that link with air pollution. And it is essential also for policies to be protective of our health and to be reflective of the negative impacts on health that we see from fossil fuel use. And that goes back to some of the points that have already been made about costs. And I also want to look a bit more precisely at what this air pollution means for our health. And I want to highlight two pollutants of concern: particulate matter and nitrogen dioxide. Particulate matter, PM, are small particles, as you'd expect. They penetrate the lungs, but they can get really, really small. And the smaller they are, the deeper they enter the body. They can enter even the bloodstream. And PM is a known and recognized carcinogen. It is linked to lung cancer, but it's also linked to COPD, to cardiovascular diseases. It impacts the reproductive system, the central nervous system. And on the other hand, nitrogen dioxide has been linked to the development of asthma, in particular in children. It can also trigger asthma attacks in people who are already suffering from this condition. It decreases the immune system defense. It can reduce lung function and cause other respiratory conditions. So this all is to illustrate how air pollution impacts the entire human body and virtually every single organ. And going briefly back to financial factors, because we've seen that this is really important to people, and it obviously is. So there's also a financial case to be made for the health argument. So there are ways to estimate the health impacts in monetary terms, so to say. And we at IFA, we commissioned a study a couple of years ago before current inflation. And we looked at the health-related costs that come from air pollution caused by residential heating with fossil fuels and with biomass, and those costs amount to around 27 billion euros per year. And finally, and this will be obvious to many of the people who are currently attending this webinar, but I think it still bears repeating because of some policies that we have seen recently that aren't as ambitious as we think at the European Public Health Alliance that they should be. And that is that climate change is a public health crisis. It impacts health, it impacts healthcare systems, it impacts vulnerable population groups the most. And so the health community has been speaking up against the use of fossil fuels because of the air pollution that it creates locally and because of climate change globally. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christina. Indeed, it's important to highlight once again the strong connection between the decarbonization of not only our buildings, but the entire economy and public health issues. It really struck me, this figure of 27 billion euro per year on the financial cost of this public health related problems derivating from fossil fuel consumption. So that's really interesting to bear in mind and to know. Now we're going to be heading to the second round of our debate, of our panel, and I would like to remind all of you that you can put questions to our panelists. We have this Q&A function in Zoom, and we'd love to hear your questions or anything that you would like our speakers to clarify and to discuss. So be sure to put the questions over there in the Q&A box. In the chat, I might not be able to see it, so please keep that in mind. Now, I would like to turn back to Paula, because now, your branch of the European Commission is very busy coming up with the heat pump action plan. My understanding is that we should have it by the end of this year, fourth quarter of this year. You've already highlighted, you've already hinted some of the main issues that you hope it's going to tackle, but could you tell us a bit more about that? And what do you think are the main challenges for the Commission in overseeing this uptake in heat pumps?
Yes, no, thank you very much. So I think one of the main aspects of the heat pump and where we saw action plan and where we saw the added value is in coming with something really dedicated to heat pumps. And I think one of the difficulties is to combine that dedicated focus with avoiding a perception that we are going for a one-size-fits-all solution. So getting that balance right is something that we are working on. And this is even more important because the focus is not only on residential buildings or more generally on buildings, but it's also heat pumps for industry use, heat pumps for district heating networks. So each of those also brings its own specificities. And in addition, the rollout of heat pumps cannot be seen, let's say, in isolation from other solutions at local level and local planning taking place, and the need for this transition also to be gradual. So those are elements that we need to put forward in the plan. And we are really now looking into the details also of the public consultation that we have carried out. It has been quite intense, with several workshops, dedicated ones, and a final, let's say, stakeholder consultation event next week, Monday. But also quite an extensive consultation through the call for evidence and through the online public consultation questionnaire. So also with those, we hope to get this balance right of having a dedicated focus, but one that can also be, let's say, adjusted to the different solutions and national contexts and even regional contexts, as it was also said in the presentation of the findings of the study. So that we really reach out in the end through citizens who are the ones who will also need to make this choice, no? And together with citizens, of course, also local authorities, industries, they would also need to make this transition of their heating systems. In terms of components, I think they remain along the lines that we have been communicating throughout the process since beginning of the year. We would like to have something on the governance, let's say, of the heat pump action plan. So a mechanism to bring together regularly industry, but also member states, stakeholders at large, around key areas requiring action. So we are working on that also with colleagues, for instance, working on renewables and working on the construction sector, because of course heat pumps cuts across several areas to get, let's say, a good setup for bringing regularly all the actors on board. So a kind of platform which was also advocated by stakeholders. Another area where we are also looking now further into details is everything that has to do with the monitoring of the market and with the monitoring of data at the national level. There we are working with our colleagues from the Joint Research Center to also see how to monitor market deployment in practice more closely with a certain level of granularity. And then more generally, we are identifying the set of actions that the plan would put forward for the years to come. And that's also an area that requires quite some preparation, because it's not only identifying the actions in abstract terms, but really trying to make them concrete enough and to make clear at what level action needs to happen. Because some areas are, of course, for the EU level, but others would be for different stakeholders or for the national level. So these are a bit the areas where we are focusing now. Is, of course, work in progress. We are just about to close, let's say, the public consultation phase and then go more deeply into the preparation of the plan.
Thank you very much, Paula. Now, I would like to zoom in one of the main issues that have been highlighted throughout this webinar so far, which is the lack of installers. And I would like to hear from Josephine specifically, what do you think can be done both at EU or national, subnational, regional level, etc., to really increase the number of installers that we have at the moment, because this really seemed to be one of the key issues here.
Yes, thank you. If you don't mind, before picking in on this question, I would like to just reply to also something that was mentioned by Monique on the need for a trustworthy environment, on the need for clarity. And this is something we very much agree to, and where governments have a very important role to play, because at the moment we see, for example, the discussions there were around the heating law in Germany, now also in France. So at the one hand, governments say, yeah, we have to be more ambitious on energy and climate, but at the same time, they are not phasing out fossil fuel boilers, and they are still subsidizing them. So this is very ambiguous, and it doesn't help to provide clarity for the consumer. So we really need, both at EU and at national level, governments to really show this is the direction we're going for, and not only say this in general terms, but really also show this in concrete measures by ending subsidies for fossil fuel boilers, by putting clear phase-out dates for fossil fuel boilers, and by adapting, for example, also this electricity to gas price ratio. And then to your question on the installers, well, indeed, to increase the number of installers, it's a bit tricky to have clear, clear measures at EU level, because of course, skills, education, it's something very regional, even local. But what could be done is, for example, to encourage countries to introduce financial incentives targeted towards installers, because what they currently face is, if they would go for a training, for example, fossil fuel boiler installer that wants to upskill to become a heat pump installer, well, during the time of training, he cannot install, he or she, and they would lose income. So funding actually these training courses and providing support, financial incentives to do this training can be one aspect. Then, of course, just the profession of an installer should be more valued. Craftsmanship in general, I don't think this is only the case for heat pump installers, but for many of these type of professions, yeah, they need to become something attractive. Also, it could help to do like marketing awareness raising campaigns aimed at young people in schools, also showing really the energy transition, how important it is to contribute to that, and that these professions are actually very concretely contributing to these positive solutions. Also for existing heating system installers, provide this type of marketing awareness raising campaigns. Then another thing that we see is that for installers, today they need to possess a number of skills. It's from really fitting the heat pump to also calculating the heat loss calculation, which type of heat pump is needed, also designing the system. So to have this all, this list of skills and competences for one person, that's a lot. So what would be good is to maybe divide this into different type of professions and skills and competences, having, for example, a heat pump fitter, so purely the person that goes to the building and puts the heat pump and finalizes the installation, the heat pump designer who really calculates and designs the system. So that could attract more different types of profiles, or also make the requirements for one person and less, and that could make it easier also to attract more people to the sector. So these are some ideas.
Thank you very much. Because indeed, being a heat pump installer, sometimes I think it was Alberto that mentioned that it's a bit like being a 3-in-1 kind of person, right? So those are some very interesting points and recommendations. Speaking about recommendations, I would like to zoom in to another one of the topics and potential recommendations and tools that have been mentioned in the study, which is an alternative dispute resolution. Monique, I would like to hear from you. Why is it so important that it's expanded to heat pump installations and home renovations? Why does it matter so much?
If you allow me, I would also like to first follow up on something that has been said by Josephine, and also a question that has been asked about the need for clarity, and what I said in my first intervention about the pollution and the fake news. And it's about, what about renewable gas heating? And this is really important, because this is the type of thing that is, in fact, it's the fight for survival of the gas industry. And when it comes to residential heating, gas is a technology of the past and not of the future. So just to make that very clear. And this is really something very important, because people, and that's why we also need dispute resolution, because people can make the wrong choice just because they have been misguided by somebody who wants, an old, outdated technology or a non-fit for purpose technology to be promoted. And in fact, installing a heat pump is not like buying a t-shirt or buying a hamburger. It is a long-term relationship that starts, meaning that once you have bought that heat pump, things can go wrong. Heat pumps can fail, or they need to be repaired, they need to be maintained. And there we see that there is a risk, and it has happened sometimes in the complaints that we have been seeing, that when a heat pump doesn't work as it should work, because either it is too expensive in the running cost, or it is the house is not warm enough, then there is some sort of how do I say, a fight on, I'm not the responsible one, go and see the other guy, between the installer and the manufacturer. And so this is something that really there should be like also a change in environment, so that people have easy access to protection when things go wrong. That means that the industry has really not to focus on selling and installing, but also about maintaining and repairing when things go wrong. But that also means that there must be like, let's say, the legislation must also then provide that framework currently it's a good opportunity, because there will be a revision of consumer enforcement framework and alternative dispute resolution framework, the ADR directive, and adding home renovation, construction works, and, for example, heat pump installations into that ADR system would make it much easier for consumers to have their disputes resolved than having to go to court, which is, of course, something that we don't, that people don't like to do, because it's so difficult, and so it's a real headache.
Thank you very much, Monique. And then I would like now to turn back and bring back into the discussion Alberto, because one of the things that we've seen is that the price of electricity can be a problem in running heat pumps. We've also already been discussing around the question of operational thoughts. So would be great to get your reflections on that, and also give you the opportunity in case you wanted to respond to some other of the comments that our fellow speakers have said.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think electricity price is a key factor in terms of make a decision for a heat pump. We've been talking about the electricity gas ratio that makes for the consumer, he doesn't see the savings. He's able to see the energy reduction, but not the savings at the end. And I think that there shall be policies I believe, I know that in some countries there are already policies to reduce taxes in electricity for heating, and we shall see more policies like this. I also would like to think that heat pump is kind of protection for consumers for energy prices. Even more if you combine with solar PV. This high efficiency technology makes the consumer suffer less the energy pricing. So regarding in the future, having a heat pump could be something that protects you for energy pricing. And also, I would like to think that in the future we are going to see a lot of new business models that offer heat as a service. So this way you can reduce the investment, or at least the investment will not be a stopper for the consumer. Also, the savings will be clear because you will have a contract for heating, and probably this will be very interesting from the point of view of consumer, because you will have a proposal for, I don't know, 5-10 years, and it will be clearly. And I think everyone is working on this, and probably the heat pump is a mature technology, but the application for air-to-water heat pump is still a new one. So probably with the technology, we will see more these models where you will not be thinking on electricity pricing, and you will think as a heat as a service.
Thank you very much, Alberto. Very interesting. Now, before I launch the Q&A, then I would like to also bring back Christina from the European Public Health Alliance. Because when it comes to heat pumps, it's important that we do not leave any consumers behind. So could you explain the Public Health Alliance concerns, particularly for low-income consumers as we transition to heat pumps, and why the Alliance signed the Better Buildings Today for Better Lives Tomorrow statement recently?
Thank you, Anna. Surely, I'll start with the first half of that question. So equity and health equity are concerns that run through all the work that we do at IFA. And in the case of heating and air pollution, that is illustrated by the so-called energy ladder, where we see a strong correlation between household income and the type of fuel and technology used. So the more polluting fuels are used by the lower income households, while clean technologies tend to only be accessible to high income earners. Broadly speaking. And on a positive note, maybe first, we see potential for really the greatest health benefits for the lowest income groups that can leapfrog to clean technology, to clean heating. A note on that is that we are particularly opposed to policies that promote the use of biomass as a renewable resource in that case, because solid fuels are such a massive source of air pollution. And then secondly, we are worried about people being trapped into polluting technologies and that they would then need to support the infrastructure costs for these as well. So I'm thinking of the gas network, and as people disconnect to use the clean options, the network maintenance per household goes up. And so policies that may have a social purpose can in fact increase health inequalities if they're not well designed and if they promote these unhealthy solutions. And lastly on this, and to start bridging towards the second half of the question, it's important to address the issue of energy poverty that I've already seen in the Q&A box. So currently over 9% of Europeans are estimated to be unable to keep their houses adequately warm. And we know that this has impacts on physical health and on mental health. And so the Better Buildings Today for Better Lives Tomorrow statement, which is part of a larger campaign, Build Better Lives. That statement brings together currently 79 organizations, and these are health organizations such as IFA, but also social, housing, climate, youth movements, and city networks. So this variety goes to show that there is a real need and also an opportunity to reimagine the built environment from a holistic perspective. And this comes in the context currently politically of the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive revision and ongoing trilogues. And some of the main demands and asks in the statement include reducing demand for energy, stopping the use of fossil fuels as quickly as possible, but also ring fencing adequate and sufficient funding for vulnerable households. And better buildings really, I think, are a clear case for health, climate, and financial co-benefits. With reduced and clean energy consumption, we see better air quality, we see lower CO2 emissions and lower bills, which are all very important. And we hope that decision makers will listen to civil society and agree on ambitious policies for a just transition and for better lives tomorrow.
Thank you very much, Christina. Now we still have about 10 minutes left, a bit more than 10 minutes left. So I will pick up on a couple of questions that we got from the audience. Those that are related to the study specifically, you're probably, I already see that you got some answers in writing from the team at BEUC. We don't have Pat with us at the moment. She's watching as participant, but the team at BEUC will be able to respond to the questions specifically on the study itself. But there's perhaps two questions that I want to pick up, and it's particularly on the topic of financing. One of them, I believe that Paula, representing the European Commission, should be able to answer, which is on the terms of financing schemes that the Commission would perhaps prefer to promote. Is it perhaps more a question of subsidies for heat pumps in terms of grants, or instruments like loans, for instance, to pursue this uptake of heat pumps? Does the Commission have any preferred option on that?
Yes, no, thank you very much. So that is also, as you know, one of the focus areas of the preparation of the heat pump action plan. And in fact, in July, one of the dedicated workshops with the stakeholders was really focusing on this aspect. And here we are also working very closely with the investors group that is run by our colleagues in another unit of the GNR, working on financial aspects and economic incentives. And here, in fact, this is precisely the discussion. What could be the best combination? What could be further promoted? And I think there are two aspects. On the one hand, already to facilitate access to everything that is already available. So together with this investors group, we are doing a mapping of what is available at different levels in terms of financial support. And then in terms of future design, probably there is a need for a combination of elements. Too much focus on subsidies would, of course, have the risk of really crowding out private investment. So it needs to be carefully considered. It may need to really be addressed just for a segment, let's say, of users, those that are in most need. So it really needs to be carefully designed from that perspective. And also more generally, we are also looking into options that could also support new mechanism, new novel approaches, also new business models. So, for instance, this element that was mentioned by Robert on the new business models for heat as a service, there are good examples on which we would like to tap into. So also, let's say, an area of work in progress, let's say a construction site, because we know how important it is, the financing aspect, where we need to have good information, but also possibly new, better tailored solutions. But then in addition, we think that something that goes a bit hand in hand, as I was mentioning earlier on, is all the aspect of the costing issues, let's say. So everything that has to do with taxation, with really facilitating as well at national level more attractive taxation policy for everything that has to do with energy efficient and renewable based solutions such as heat pumps. And similarly getting the ratio right, because one thing is of course the upfront cost, but then equally important are the running costs. So all these elements are part of the same, let's say, area to tackle, and here I would say a combination of solutions, and again not a one size fits all, but something that really is adjusted to the needs of the different markets and also of the different users.
Thanks, Paola. Would anybody else, any other panelists, want to comment on this question specifically on the business models, on the loans versus grants scheme? I see Monique has her hand raised. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I also believe it's not a one size fits all. There are different types of needs of financing for different types of consumers, and I would really like to insist that it's important to direct a lot of the subsidies, the public support, to the less affluent consumers. Because this will also help them, let's say, getting out of the tension that sometimes exists with energy prices. What I would like to add also is that there are a lot of schemes that can exist, like home build schemes or payback schemes. I'm a little bit missing the finance sector in that conversation. There could be a lot of creativity with private financial solutions. There's a lot of talk about green loans, but we don't see a lot of green loans being proposed in an attractive way for average consumers. So I would like to call on the finance sector to be maybe part of the solution also in that transition.
Thanks, Monique. Hoping that we have someone in the financial sector as part of the webinar. If not, we'll be sure to send them the link to that. Josephine, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I did not completely understand very well what Monique mentioned because there was a lot of echo. Maybe it's only on my side. What we as EHPA on this point usually stress is indeed, again, this operating costs which need to go down, and then for many of the households, middle class and so on, probably subsidies would not be necessary anymore because the business case would make sense and you would see results from your investments soon enough because the operating costs are so low. But then of course for low income households you will always need subsidies, and you need to help these people to make the shift. So there also we hope that the climate fund that will come in together with the ETS2 will also give that a big support to these low-income households to invest in climate solutions such as heat pumps.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Josephine. There was a similar question which asked specifically whether should there be state schemes available to all households which want to invest in heat pumps, or to focus at least on the vulnerable or energy poor, as those are public funds. I don't know if there's anyone who would want to add any answers to this point. Anyone? No? Oops, wait, I don't see. There you go, Monique, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, because I mentioned it in my first question. That's why I did not react immediately, Anna. But I just wanted to say, of course, yes, you need to do some positive discrimination there. We don't all consumers do not need necessarily help, financial help in order to opt for a heat pump. So there is really a need to, let's say, diversify the public funding depending on the income of the people. Privilege those who are less affluent.
Brilliant. Thanks, thanks, Monique. Any other thoughts or questions on that?
Well, maybe just briefly to kind of restate what I was saying just earlier on about the need to protect vulnerable households, because that is a place where we would also see very important health gains, and those health gains will then also be reflected in financial gains like productivity gains or visits to the hospitals that can be avoided. And so also, yeah, just to reinforce the same point that it's really important to have dedicated funding for vulnerable households.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, thank you very much, Christina. Now, I have one perhaps last question. This one comes from Flaminia Bonanni of E3G. She's asking that if citizens seem more keen to switch to heat pumps, what is retaining governments from taking bolder action? Recently, we've seen the UK, Germany, and France all step back compared to their initial action. And what is, in this sense, the gap in terms of political action that needs to be filled? I see Monique wants to react as well. Please go ahead.
Yes, I mean, this is quite, can I be blunt? Because in fact, we see it in all areas, in all policy areas that are related to the green transition. We see for the moment like vested interest, like the fossil fuel industry, who is of course a major current stakeholder when it comes to economics, markets, and economic well-being of member states. And they in fact are scaremongering, saying that there is for the moment over-regulation and that there is a green fatigue. And that one of the consequences is one of their requests is to push the pause button on everything related to the green transition. Sometimes they even are so blunt to do that in the consumer's name. And I can say, don't do it in the consumer's name. Because really, what all our surveys show is that it is important to act as quickly as possible, not only because there are no consumers on a dead planet, but also because at the end of the day, once you overcome in a smart way the upfront investment, you're even better off economically, and you are more resilient towards crisis. So it is, I would say, it's just very heavy lobby tactique and techniques that explain the shift of some governments doing a U-turn while mentioning high ambitions and then going back on those ambitions, and that's bad for us.
Thanks, Monique. Josephine, very briefly, since we moved to the next session.
Also, for the sector itself, this is very worrying because the heat pump sector, they have made 5 billion investments in the next years in new factories, in additional productions. And now we see all this hesitation from these policymakers, and that also scares consumers. There's a lack of certainty. The political direction is less clear, and yeah, one indeed, the heavy lobbying will probably have a big impact in that, as Monique pointed out. Is it also mainly maybe because the elections are coming up and they look at the short term rather than the long term? Yeah, that's I don't have the clear answer either. But it's very clearly that this is a big problem. We need this political clarity both for the sector and for consumers in general.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Josephine. And now a final question to all of you. And I would like you to answer really in just a couple of words, just a concept, really, just one idea. Let's imagine that you are buying a heat pump tomorrow. What is the one thing that you would like to see improving in the consumer experience? Maybe I can start again with you, Paula. As a consumer, what's the one thing that you would like to see improved?
I think really everything that has to do with convenience. So the one thing would be convenience, and this would mean also, lower cost, smaller, more efficient, less noisy, more aesthetic, but in one word, convenience.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Paula. Alberto, how about you?
I think similar to Paula. For me, I think there's a need of a clear value proposition when an installer propose a heat pump in terms of savings, of comfort, of how your house could be increased the pricing because of a change of technology, and also the healthy benefits, as Cristina says previously.
Thanks, Alberto.
So a clear value proposition will be.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Alberto. Cristina, how about you?
Yes, thank you. I would like to feel supported and empowered to make a decision that I know protects my health and the health of my loved ones. And that means information on health impacts, on emissions. It means financial support where that's needed. And it ultimately, to me, means a choice environment that strictly limits the availability of options that are harmful to health.
Thanks, Cristina. Josephine, how about you?
Yeah, I think mine puts a bit together all what has been previously said. Is this one-stop shop that guides you through the whole process and takes away administrative burden, that guides you to the right financing, installers, and so on. Yeah, so convenience, as was pointed out by Paula, provided by this one-stop shop.
Thanks, Josephine. And last but not least, Monique, what's the one thing you would improve?
Yeah. So, I mean, if I have to choose one thing as a consumer, I would really like to be sure that the installer that I am having a conversation with is giving me the right advice, so that I can really trust them and can feel comfortable and confident that I'm taking the good decision.
Thank you very much, Monique, and thank you very much to all of you for your answers. I believe that this webinar has been very important in really informing on the consumer perspective and the day-to-day consumer struggles when it comes to encouraging this and making a reality out of this uptake of heat pumps that is much needed for our energy transition. So thank you very much to the great speakers that have joined us in this debate. Thanks to all of you for joining us once again this morning, to all of our audience, and for your active participation and questions. As a reminder, the study is available on BEUC's website, and this webinar is going to be made available as well shortly afterwards. And see you at the next consumer debate. In the meantime, be sure to keep the conversation going using the hashtag consumer debates, and be sure to follow BEUC on its social media channels to stay up to date with all the next events and activities. Thank you very much to all of you once again, and have a great day.